Good morning, everyone. It's Joker, and today we are back with another slime video. I am finally free from all of my office visits, so now I have time to sit down and record everything, so now things should be getting back to normal schedule. But today, we're going to take on the boss battles of Jubilee. Currently ranked number 3, even though my boss battle scores are not the greatest. I mean, they're still top 10, so I'm rank 5 on both of them. Could I do better? Probably. Do I want to do better? No. Because, I mean, I'm guaranteed my 600 crystals in my moats now, so there's no real point to me trying any harder. So, we'll go over the teams that I used for both of my good runs, and then I have an alternate team for each stage. And again, like the whole disclaimers from the previous video do still exist, is that your results may vary, because you don't have the same units that I do. Protection characters and magic buildings are going to be essential for you to just edge out that little extra bit of damage on each stage. So let's get started now with Boss Battle 1. Alright, so this is the team that I use for Boss Battle 1 to get the highest score. I actually got this from a Japanese YouTuber, and I cannot pronounce their name, but the link to their video will be in the description below, because I gotta give him credit for it. At least I think it's a him. But we've got Frey, Towa, the hero for the rewind. I know in his video he did use her crit buff as well, but in my run I didn't get a chance to because she wasn't on rotation when I had the chance to. But Rimuru is here for his protection gauge, his debuff skill that gives greens extra alt gauge, and then his orb change ability, which is going to be key for this battle. And then we have the hero, who's going to be pretty important here, with the debuff and then the alt kind of swap and everything going on. Shizu will be good as well for her stacking attack buff and her orb change, and then MILIM is obviously our DPS. So let's get started. We're using the traditional 3 protection gauge starting units, so no extra point stuff going on here. We don't have ices to boost the greens at all, so we're just going to run it as is. And it does work pretty well. It does require, some RNG. Ideally, turn 2, you're going to want to have a hand that you can just orb change into without having to use Frey. But either turn 2 or turn 3. So turn 1, we're going to swap MILIM and Shizu in, so we have all of the fantasy units up front. And then we're going to use both of the orb changes for a 6 hand of green, and we're going to send it. So here, we're really banking on getting that, at least a good amount of greens. Hopefully a good amount of MILIM greens, if you can really work on it. But sometimes it doesn't quite work out like that. So, we just kind of got to make do with it. So we got 5 Shizus, and not a lot of greens. So, I mean, we have to use Frey here. There's nothing we can really do about that. So, here's the attack buff on all 3 of our units, because ideally, you'd have all 3 of them alt, because one of them lowers defense, one of them raises physical attack, which will just help MILIM hit that much harder. None of the other units have effects that would be beneficial to the team. Well, I actually don't think they have any effects now that I think about it. But there we go. So we've used Frey. We brought Rimuru back in so that his protection gauge on turn 3 will help us get Frey again. That's kind of important. And then we come here, where we can actually make things work out fairly well. It's just unfortunate that we don't have any MILIM orbs. So here, we can go ahead and orb change with Shizu and Rimuru and MILIM, and we can get that full hand right here. And then we can also bring in the hero for Rimuru, so we can use her alt swap, so Shizu's orb doesn't actually exist on the field again. Which will just ensure that we can get her alt. Well, actually, we have her EX alt already, because it doesn't matter. But this also gives us the hero's alt, which is important. So here, we're going to send it. I mean, Shizu's orbs are kind of wasted because she's already maxed out, and she's the least hard hitter on the team out of the 3. But it is what it is. So I believe here now I make a misplay, because I think I should have used the attack buff with Shizu to get another stack in, but I don't remember if I do. Okay, I do. Alright, that is important. So here, we're going to use the attack buff for the second stack. We're going to use the debuff from the hero, and then we're going to swap in. So we're going to swap Shizu out of here. She's done. Like, she's ready to go, which is fine. So now we have this, where we can get the hero ult. So we're going to use the rewind here, because we're turn 2. So the rewind is important because we're going to take advantage of the big time debuff that the hero put on. I guess the hero 2.0 put on, EX hero. And we're going to send full hands of greens twice in a row, hopefully with a bunch of MILIM orbs. So we've already used the hero's orb steal once, so we use it again, cost 20 points. So now we're ready to go. This will get MILIM's ult. So next turn, we're really banking on getting multiple MILIM orbs to get her EX ult. So it's kind of important. 150k on that 200% orb is really nice. So let's do it again. And we get 3 MILIM orbs, which I do believe is enough to get her EX ult. So let's use Rimuru's debuff to ensure that we can do that, because we're going to get the 50% extra stats on that. And then his orb change just for extra damage on the greens, just to help us out a little bit. So here we've used rewind. We've done 2 turns now of crits and MILIM and maximum damage power right here. MILIM also has her attack buff, so she's doing extra damage from that as well. So 72, 72. That's pretty good damage right there. 151k right there. So now we're almost to 1 million, and we haven't even sent ults yet, of which we have all 3 EX ults now. And thankfully we got a Rimuru orb, so we can swap that out. Unfortunately, none of the normal orbs were MILIM, because obviously they were doing like 150k on the 200%, which would have been very nice. They're all Shizu, who is the weakest of our units, right? So it's something we got to deal with. We also don't have enough points to use another stack of the attack buff, which is unfortunate. I think the way the JP player had it, Shizu was up front, so he was able to use the extra stack on the rewind, which worked out pretty well for him. But sadly, I did not get such luck. So there are things I could do to improve my score, but I mean, this works. I have never got a triple EX ult again, so this one does like 100k or something. Yeah, 100k for the hero on an AoE, which is good. And then MILIM comes in and drops 352k. And then the follow-up orbs push us over 1.5 million damage, which is currently my number 5 spot right here. So that works out fairly well. It could have gone better, but it could have gone a whole butt ton worse. So that's how that one worked out. Let's see the score breakdown. And it is 95k. I think the top players have like over 100k, so I'm missing a little bit, but I was also missing a few buffs and missing some MILIM orbs, so it's to be expected. But that is my best team score so far, so let's move on now to an alternate team that will get you like half of that score. Alright, so here is my alternate team for Boss Battle 1. This is assuming that you don't have any of the new fantasy characters except for Frey. And if you don't have Frey, then 1, sorry. And 2, you could use Light Shion Protector or Space Guy Protector. Like, you could use them. They're not going to be the greatest things in the world, but already this team is pretty... It's not going to do the most damage, so just using a different protector is going to lower that considerably. But, again, you have Frey, but you have no new fantasy characters. But you can at least use the old characters that were put onto the team, Rimuru, Shion, and Alice. And then you have MILIM for our turn 1 orb change, because no one has a single blue orb change here. And then Isis is here to use her massive green buff and help us get as many ults as humanly possible. So let's go ahead and start this battle up. This team still needs to stack skills because Shion needs extra pierce power, but you only have 3 turns to do such a thing instead of 4 for MILIM. So your window for using skills is smaller, and turn 1 you're only using 1 skill instead of 2, which already kind of hurts you there. But we're going to bring Shion in. She's got her trait, which gives her extra ult gauge, alongside Rimuru giving us extra protection gauge. I don't remember what Alice's trait is. I think it's points every 3 turns, if I'm correct on that. But also, Alice does more damage than Shion does, because Alice also has type advantage on top of the 60% additional that she does to fire units. So sending her last actually gets us more points than sending Shion last, even though Alice is only 84 versus my 100 Shion. So just keep that in mind. But this turn, we got pretty lucky right here. So we have 4 greens, we have 4 Shion orbs, looking pretty good. And then we can just use MILIM's orb change again, which is a good and bad thing, but it's what we gotta do. We also use the Pierce debuff, I believe, from Rimuru to help get us extra ult gauge on the greens. And we've also saved Frey, and that was an unfortunate guard right there. So here we go. This is actually a pretty decent hand, because now we have 2 full Freys because of Rimuru's trait, and we have all these MILIM orbs, which are not important. But we can swap MILIM out for Alice and start working on getting her ult. So let's use the orb change here. And then we will get Isis in for the green buff, finally using it. And then we'll swap in Alice for Isis, and then we'll send this entire hand, because these 2 Shion orbs will get us another ult, which works out pretty well. And we are still holding on to our 2 Freys right now, which is great, because that means guaranteed we can use orb changing for the next turn and the final turn to ensure that everyone has crit. So this is pretty good right here. So we have a whole bunch of Alice orbs, whole bunch of not Rimuru orbs though. We only have 1, so we're kind of bank on Rimuru getting an extra orb here. So we're gonna use some orb changes. This is our final turn for trying to stack up with Shion. So we've used her attack stack, and we're going to send her away now, because ideally we're going to use the ult buff and the pierce buff on the final turn, which is going to cost most of our points there. So there we go, we swapped Isis in, and thankfully we did get a second Rimuru orb, which guarantees that we get his ult as well. So there's the Frey, give at least Rimuru crit, and then we're going to send it, maximum points, almost a full Frey meter, but it doesn't really matter. So now we have all 3 ults. We have Alice, Rimuru, and Shion's ult, and unfortunately she's loving to guard our final hit. But look at this, I mean, we got a pretty good hand, so we can use MILIM's ult buff first before swapping her out, and then we can bring Shion in for MILIM, who is going to have a number of orbs now. So let's do that, and then we can swap Isis out for Alice, and then we're looking good. We can use Frey. That'll give us enough points to use the Pierce buff that will activate Shion's extra power. So now we're going to be looking, okay here. Just okay. Not great, but it's okay. I think on the nuke turn we were sitting at 900k on the other team, and we're at 231 now, so use your imagination. But Alice does, I think, 150? 120, alright. Rimuru does shit, 96k. Okay. And then Shion hits 189k, and then her normal orbs do 26,000 and up to 50-something. So there we go. That is the run with my alternate team. Very obviously not as good. 729,000 damage versus like the 1.5 million, so half the score. But I mean, if it's what you got, it's what you got, and at least you are able to get a score on this, and it's better than not playing it at all, because you at least get crystals out of it. So that is the alt team for Boss Battle 1. Let's move on now to Boss Battle 2. Alright, so Boss Battle 2 is a similar team to what I was using for Boss Battle 1. We've just swapped out the hero for Shuna for the extra alt buff damage and her orb changing, which doesn't really help that much because it's to blues, but we can use it on a safe turn and just get another stack of a skill in. I found that having Shuna here works better than bringing the hero, because yes, we do get the rewind, and we, maybe could try the same strategy of sending, 2 hands of nice full buffed MILIM orbs, but for here, I really want to make sure that our AoE units can do the most amount of damage. And the hero on the nuke turn is only going to give them 30% crit resistance down, which isn't really going to be that big of a thing since we're already going to have crit from the hero. So Shuna giving that 70% alt buff will help them hit harder, and will definitely help MILIM hit a lot harder. So, you know, also ideally you're going to have 3 EX alts. That did not happen for me, so obviously there is room for improvement. But let's go ahead. This is my number 5 ranked team still. Let's go ahead and start it up. There's not really too much different strategy to this either. But the orb hand is different. Instead of having a 1 orange and 1 blue, it is just 2 orange. No, actually, hold on, I have that backwards, right? No, this is 2 orange orbs, I believe, to start out, not the special convert, right? I think so. Is it? Yeah, okay, so it's 2 orange orbs. So that's what Rimuru's here for again, and also Shizu has it, so we're covered there still. There's Rimuru's change. We're going to swap Shuna out for MILIM, and then we're going to bring Shizu out for Rimuru. Or no, for the hero. Okay, so I have Wind Trainee attached to Shizu, so between her and Rimuru, we have protection gauge for the first 3 turns that we're getting from them, which will help us out, you know, a bit. I could have put, you know, like Wind Hinata underneath, Wind Hinata underneath her, sorry, but oh well. And obviously here we did not get a perfect orb change, but we did get 4 MILIM orbs, so I mean that's something. So let's use the Pierce debuff now and send him away, and then we'll bring the hero in, and then we'll use the first stack of Shizu's skill, and then I believe we just use Frey and call it good. We're going to let a lot of points here go by, but I'm trying to ensure that if we get a good orb change hand, that we're not that expensive on the orb changes. We are going to use MILIM's orb or damage buff here because she has a lot of orbs, and I want to take advantage of that. And then, because further on in the fight, we're going to get her EX ult, and then she's going to go away, so we can just hold it and get those points back. So 31k, so 60k on this hit, 65.5. That's pretty good damage. So here we go. The 1 or 2 MILIM orbs we're going to have here will ensure that we can get her EX ult, and we can use another stack of Shizu's power right here. And then MILIM's orb change for some reason, because... Oh, okay, alright. What are we doing here? What am I doing here? Oh, okay, I see. So we're foregoing the extra stack of Shizu, so we could use Rimuru's orb change. Okay. See, I've already forgotten how I ran this, but... is that the best idea? I think so, because I want to ensure that we can at least use Frey on the nuke turn. If we use her now, there is not a guarantee that we're going to have her ready on the final turn, and, you know, building back up to it. So this full hand of greens right here will ensure that we can do that, because next turn we can use Frey, and that will build us up to another Frey for the final turn. So here, this gets us MILIM's EX ult, so that's very good. It is... I don't know if it's more important to get the EX ults for the AoE characters, but they don't have like the big crit damage buff, right? So they're probably not going to do quite the same amount of damage as MILIM does on the single target, but So here we have the MILIM ult and the Shizu ult, but we have no waiting ults in the back, so we can swap them out. So I'm going to bring the hero in for MILIM because she has those 3 orbs, and this will guarantee that we get her ult as well. And then we can swap out Shizu. Oh, never mind, hold on. We're going to use Frey here. Interesting. And we're going to swap her orb. Okay. Alright, so we're going to keep them both up here. Okay, because I wanted to try and get her EX ult, but obviously it wasn't enough. But this also gets Rimuru's ult, which ensures that we'll have an orb for MILIM to bring in next turn. Therefore, you know, we have 3 ults now. So thankfully we did get another orb for him anyways, which worked out. So now we can go ahead and bring Shuna in for Rimuru, use the ult buff, and then call it good. So ult buff here, and then next turn we can use the orb debuff skill from the hero, and then MILIM already has her damage buffs active, so they're just waiting in the back here. So we can do this, and then I believe we can use 1 more stack of the attack buff from Shizu. Yeah, there we go. So that is, I think, 45% extra damage now for everybody, 45% extra attack, plus the resistance down. And we do have a MILIM orb to finish up here, which is nice. So what do we do here? Shizu, 83k. Alright, 78k. And then MILIM does 558k. So obviously, yeah, the differences are there. And then her final orb does 147,000 damage for a final score of 1.6k, which is fairly good. Fairly good here. All turns finished, and that gives us a final score of my 100,000 and change right here. So that is currently my highest score. Could it be improved? Yes. Still, we could get EX alts for at least one of them. One of the AoE units, maybe both if we got lucky, but it is what it is. So that's the team right there. Let's move on now to the alternate team. So, we're now going to assume that you have none of the new fantasy characters. Not even the Shion and Rimuru and Alice. No, we're going to use something different. This stage, this Boss Battle 2 does not nerf orange orbs like the first stage does. Because the first stage, you can't use blues or oranges. You can use oranges on Boss Battle 2. So, if you need an EX alt for, say, EX Rimuru, who is physical and also water, type advantage against all these guys, you know, that can work out. And then the free-to-play Gobta from the Fount of Wisdom is an AoE unit as well, so he can hit okay. Just okay. And then Water Shun is here, one, because she also has type advantage, and we've got the alt buff. And then Isis is here for her orb change and green buff, and then Sufia is here because we need someone to do that turn 1 orb change with double oranges, but also we could use her charm effect to help push Rimuru's ult even higher. So that is that's the strategy I'm using here. And then ideally on the nuke turn we'll have the alt buff from Shuna plus her ult, and then the physical buff from Rimuru for him and Gobta. So 3 alts, single target, 2 AoEs, and this will get you a score. Obviously, we're not getting any of the extra, like, 60% additional damage that Frey gives to the other characters, so our numbers will not look that great, but at least we have type advantage, and we are assuming you don't have any of the new characters. But, as you probably saw on the starting screen, we're also not using the whole protection gauge setup. We're using 2 of the skill point givers, so we have enough points turn 1 to use both the Isis buff and the Sufia orb change, so that'll help us push and get Towa here, but also help us get additional alt gauge turn 1, because we're already at like halfway to Rimuru's ult right now, which is pretty good. And now here, what we can do is pretty much cry about it. There's not really much we can do here. So we're just going to send these nerfed blues and call it a day. So then next turn, when we get this hand, we have technically enough points to use both Isis and Sufia's orb change and kind of just let it ride, because the green buff from Isis also nerfs oranges on their own. So it's like a 50% nerf to alt gauge increase. So we kind of have to wait that out. It's good for initial points and initial alt gauge, but it's going to run out on like the 4th turn, which will then allow us to have double Towa, so we can use a whole bunch of orange orbs to really push the ult, and then also have another Towa ready for the nuke turn, so we have enough points to use both of the big time buffs. But also we've used the charm for Sufia, which is going to give us that 15% extra alt gauge, which does help because it pushes us closer to Rimuru, and now the Isis buff has worn off, which is important. Gobta doesn't have an EX buff. Also, his attack skill for wind and pierce power means nothing here, because no one's a wind unit, and no one is using pierce. So don't even try and use that skill, it's a waste of time. But here, we're going to use the charm one more time, just to ensure that we get it, even though we have 3 Rimuru orbs. But this will also help us get Shuna's ult, because we only have 1 orange for her. And we also kind of have to keep Rimuru up front, because we don't have the hero to swap his orb away. So these 5 oranges alongside the charm are enough to get us the EX ult plus Shuna's ult, because it'll cover that last little bit that we're missing right here. So charm, and there we go. So now we have the EX ult for Rimuru, we have the ult for Shuna, and we have Gobta's ult in the back. And all 3 units up here are buffers, so let's use the physical buff. It's only going to hit Rimuru and Gobta, because Shuna is obviously magic. But now we have Towa, and then that'll give us just enough points to use the alt buff to help us hit just a little bit harder. So now we just kind of send it. Send Rimuru last. Again, it's not going to be a great score, but if it's what you got, it's what you got. So 36k is terrible. Gobta does 50k across the board. Had a natural pierce over there. And then 120k in the middle. I mean, that's good damage. That did more than, you know, what the Sufi, or not Sufi, but Shizu and Hero did, but they also didn't have EX ults. So, grain of salt right there. But that is the team. Let's see what the score ends up being right here. It is 50k. So again, about half of what my good team's damage is. But we are missing all of the meta characters on this team, and this is just to help get you into the scoreboard for, you know, crystal gain from the ranking rewards. So that is the video for Jubilee boss battles. Let me know in the comments if this helped you out. Did it inspire you to make a different team that, you know, based on the units you had? Or, you know, are there other teams that you use that could outscore me? Let me know and I'll try them out. But that's it for me, guys. Take it easy, and I'll see you later.